Right folks, I'm sweating today, but I tell you something, the men that would have been working here 50 years ago would have been sweating a lot more, so much so they had to have salt tablets. Where I'm standing there was once the great Round Oak Works, but in 1982, Tube Investments and British Steel sold the land to two local boys. They did what they thought was right, but the contract said they had to destroy it. Even though there were local firms willing to come in and make steel at Round Oak, they closed it. Very sad. The sign over there still says their name.
And champagne to simple bread and butter, in 3 generations, from the gutter to the gutter, but still a survivor.
Hello everybody and welcome to Round Oak Part 2. You've been waiting a while for this, I know that, but it means a lot to me and I hope it means as much to you. I'm starting where I'm finishing today at the Round Oak Monument. So this monument, we're going to be reopening it on the time that the man died, Richard Smith. So who's Richard Smith? So Richard Smith was a man that worked for the Earl of Dudley. The Earl of Dudley was the main guy in this area, including why Brierley Hill became Brierley Hill. It's because of the Earl really. He had great minerals under the ground, and he and his, you could say the reason it happened was because of Richard Smith. His mineral agent, born in Tipton, normal lad, went to a local mining school and learnt about coal, and he recognised the importance of coal. So he basically was the man who put together Round Oak. Round Oak Steelworks was a place where the Earl could put together all his other interests in the area. Coal to burn in the furnaces, clay to make the furnace bricks and the furnaces themselves, and also pig iron. Pig iron was being made with the iron ore around here in his various forges, whether it be the Gibbons' forge down at the old level or the new level, which was the Earl's itself. The Round Oak was meant to pull that all together, so that pig iron that was being made by his minerals, by his coal, so it was all done in-house really. And the genius of Richard Smith is he made that happen. He put Round Oak into production. It was the biggest at the time in the country, if not the world. It had twice as many puddling furnaces and twice as many hammers. It was double the size what a normal big ironworks was at the time. Obviously then puddling. If you don't know about puddling and stuff, I suggest you watch your first video, Round Oak Part 1, which will get you up to where we are today, which is around 1900. So yeah, Brierley Hill. The town sits on this big hill. All around it was mining. And it was a perfect position really for the town to become like a boom town, and it did. You know, the massive, huge works was Round Oak Steelworks. Gone now, obviously, and this is what we've got left. But yeah, keep watching the video, and at the end we will be back here to open it. And Mr. George Hutton, I'm so glad. I don't know who opened it the first time. I don't think it was a worker. We got a worker opening it this time. There's no officials allowed. So George Hutton is in his 80s. He worked at Round Oak. He was a plate fitter. You'll see him in this video talking some of his stories. A right card. He's going to be here cutting the ribbon later on in the video, so keep watching guys. Round Oak Part 2. Right, so we'll start where we ended off in the last video, which is just before World War I. So let's go up now to where the works was and talk a bit about just before the war. So I'm now over by where my dad would have worked. This part of the site would have been dispatched. There would have been a big machine here during Operation Nimrod in the 70s called the bar straightener. My dad would have known that machine well, made in Lye by the Bronx Company. But yeah, so in 1909, war was coming, so they modernised. They expanded on the three open hearths and made them into 5 open hearths. It was 2 50-tonners and 3 40-tonners. They would again be improved in 47 on another modernisation scheme. But the war was coming. Now, there was a problem because the men working at the works wanted to go to war in many cases, you know, but they were told they couldn't because it was a reserved occupation. That means they can't go to war because they're needed here on the home front, you know. And yet, these men that wanted to go to war were often targeted by the women who had men who had been killed or lost limbs at war. They were called cowards. So they had to wear badges which told the women they were on important war work. One of the things that women would do during the war was called the White Feather campaign. And the white feather campaign was, you know, they'd give you a white feather and call you a coward. They'd send it in a letter sometimes, like a poison pen. And some of these men weren't cowards. They were just told they couldn't go because they were doing these hard jobs, industrial jobs, making steel for the war effort. So it was a sad period, but it happened. But so during the war, they made metal for the war effort and it did well. The steel actually went up to £25 a tonne, which is a lot of money. The trouble came after. So in around 1924, the steel dropped to £5 a tonne, which is really bad. And at this point, the new law, or the Viscount Ednam, was taking over the firm. He basically dissolved the board and got loads of new managers in, basically loads of new people on the board to say, look, let's get this done right. One of them was Hutton, George Hutton, and his son, to again. And this involved modernisation and other things. In 1931, the three great chimneys that had once been part of the three early 17-ton open hearths were felled. You can see them falling here. Very sad time, but they were felled. We will hear about other chimneys falling later, including one in 1978 where we got a funny story about Les Pinches. But yeah, so the war came and went. 1924, new board. A few years later, the general strike. The works survived the general strike. The Earl had all his own coal and stuff. I don't know if they were involved in the strike, so I imagine they were, but they survived. During the war, they did so well that some of the money they put towards the new social and welfare club opened in 1919. Let's go down now to the site. It's now David Lloyd. After the war in 1919, they opened the sports ground. Now, this was basically a thank you to the workers, you know, the men who had gone off to fighting. They put a load of money together. And some was subscription, but most of it come from the Earl and from these profits from the war. And they built this huge site on my left, which became the athletics ground. I never knew it. It did survive after the works closed in the 80s, but then it went, and now it's David Lloyd, you know, a massive affair. But I'm sure people watching this now have got fond memories of it, you know. It was a huge affair. And like I say, they had a cricket team, they had a football team, and they were doing pretty well. They were quite a big team at the time, well known. Right, so I'm at the side now, at the side of what became the athletic club. And you can see this was put up in 1919 after the war, using profits from the war, I think. And you can see the bricks they used had a life before. You can imagine, it's a war just happened. They need to save money where they can, especially when it's something like this, an athletics club. So they would have maybe knocked down the orchard where it was built on, and maybe use these bricks again. So where they come from, I don't know, but there's all sorts of bricks in here. There's fire clay, blues, reds, some of them a bit gnarly. Yeah, you mean it, mate? You mean it? There you go. Cameo, what's your names? Dylan and Dino. Cameo, Dylan and Dino there. Young lads coming up in the Black Country now, they are. They should be working at Round Oak, but they ain't, because it went, and as we'll see later, very sad what happened, and it should never have shut. Terrible what Tube Investments did at the end, and British Steel, and our government. Awful. So yeah, they built this beautiful place for people to come and to celebrate. You can see some photos here of them actually on this athletics ground in the 50s, I believe, running and doing different sports days. They'd have where the old men had raced, the seniors race, and in the 70s and 80s running races, you know. And these men that fought in the war in the 30s and 40s, you know, seen some horrific things. Right, let's go back up now to the works itself. 1939, the war came. Again, they were in a great position by that point to help fight the war. One part of the works, I've been told, was used to make gun barrels.
There was a rifling machine for boring 6-inch, I think it was, a 6-inch gun at the end of the melting shop until it shut down. It was still owned by the
military.
Wow. Got the government stamp on it.
The cross, the arrows, the cross arrows.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing before we carry on about the war is the shadow furnace. So before it became the new H&G electric arc in the mid-50s, the site of the new level, you can see an image from the area of the new level. The new level was a blast furnace, and you can see the blast furnaces clearly on this aerial picture. And even though by the time the war came, these furnaces were no longer working, they built one of the largest hand-charged furnaces in the world in this site, on that site, and it was there just in case the worst happened and the Germans invaded, Operation Sea Lion. You know, some say that they'd gone through us like a Dulce assault. If they had have invaded, that furnace would have been used to keep up with the shortfall of furnaces lost further south. But, you know, luckily, the Battle of Britain, our brave boys, never before, so many, owed so much to so few, won the Battle of Britain, and the Operation Sea Lion was cancelled and the Blitz began. But if he had come, this blast furnace on the new level would have been coming to effect, you know, and you can see it's got blackouts on the top there, look, and it was a huge furnace that was never used, and it was dismantled in 1947 during the modernisation and eventually became the new electric arc furnace for Tube Investments. So yeah, the Second World War came, the Second World War went. Interesting thing about the war again is there was so many weapons being taken off the Germans, high quality, high carbon steel. The Americans were taking a lot, but the British were capturing just as much. A lot of it was being sent home. And tons of the stuff, tons of machine guns were being sent over. And the thing was, we were at the start of the Cold War, and we didn't know whether or not the Russians were going to kick off. So a lot of these weapons were still viable. We weren't fighting a war, we didn't want to fight a war, but they wanted to keep them in reserve. So tons and tons of this stuff went to Round Oak, and because they're working on other stuff, they put it up on the top of the Wallers, where the Wallers estate is now. They put it up there and they covered it with other scrap, but the crane couldn't reach to the centre when covering it, so there was this like dip in the middle. Imagine a pyramid with no tip on, instead of a tip, like a dip, and this dip you could get to the guns. So young lads in the late 40s, early 50s, like Ken Beresford, Ronald Walters, were going up there, and countless others who've no doubt long gone.
What we call the Wallers, even though Wallers Road was there, where they kept the scrap on top of the Fenner's pool was called the Wallers, and I used to keep the locos over there as well. But
Yeah,
there was
big train shed there.
A lot of confiscated and disused weapons left over from the war.
Yeah.
All the kids on the Dudley Fields have got guns from there. God damn it, they're running about with them,
From
you
the
know.
Round Oak side.
Oh, now they're down the Wallers.
Wow.
All open. It's just right away through there, you see.
Really?
It's still there. Oh, all them on the Dudley Fields, the kids, they'd all got guns.
After World War II,
All
there was a
sorts of
stockpile,
guns,
wasn't there?
rifles,
They had a big stockpile up on the back
stick
of the
guns.
That's the one, In 1951, Clement Attlee's government came in, they took over, and they started bringing in some really good reforms, socialist reforms, including the NHS, which we still depend on today. So the Iron and Steel Act came in. They wanted to protect the workers. Yeah, Attlee did a lot of good. Another thing, I mean, around me now, everybody's having a drink, it's a hot day, the waterfront's packed. Back then, it would have been packed of people drinking as well, but they were working as well, so, you know, you needed it, you know. These jobs were hot jobs. Every department had its beer carrier. You can see one of them here loaded up. Some of them just drank pop, but a lot of them did have beer, you know, and it was allowed. I don't know when they took it out of being allowed, but in the original rules it said no strong liquor, but beer was allowed. So, you know, it was one of those things. It's such a hard job that you needed a drink. I know Les tells me he had salt tablets as well, so, you know, you had to keep hydrated. So yeah, beer was important. Man cannot liveth by bread alone. So yeah, we'll go up now to H&G. In 1953, Tube Investments, a big firm, they made tubes for aeroplanes during the war, and they had several interests in different companies. Imagine like BlackRock today. Now, this company still exists today, still a big multi-million pound company. Now we're up on the new level site. So originally this was a blast furnace like we spoke about World War II. But eventually, when TI took over in 53, they turned it into a electric arc, cutting edge stuff. TI were advanced in that sense. They were experimenting with electric arc as soon as they come in with the small, I think it was a 6-7 ton arc furnace, you know. So they were experimenting with casting tubing, but it didn't work out. And in the end, they brought about H&G. You can see Mr. Capewell here. He was an ex-guardsman. He's putting a shovel full of mineral in to get the melt to what they want, the specifications. Basically, you could put a lot more in them with an electric arc. So the idea being, they'd literally, fuck's sake, they put these huge graphite diodes, 3 of them, in like lower down. You can see it happening here, and the electric would flow through, and actually like a weld really, it would make the metal molten, and then they'd add some more, so they could put 10 ton in or 5 ton at a time rather than little bits. You know, with the old open hearth, you could only cut a bit at a time. So yeah, these new furnaces were 75 tons. They were smaller than the open hearth, but they were much quicker turnaround time. So a melt is the time it takes to take this scrap iron into a ingot sort of thing. Again, they didn't have a method of continuous casting at that point. They were still using ingots, so they were still taking the molten metal and teaming it into ingot moulds, various sizes. I mean, George here tells me about a 42 ton ingot.
Oh, they used to make 42 ton ingots.
Wow.
Round Oak.
That's a beast.
And they travel by a road, yellow out,
Wow.
on a, and a mate of mine, Billy Jones, he made the cover to go over them. It would only lose 2% of its heat going to the forge.
And he's also got a funny story about an ingot that fell in the cut.
They used to take ingots out of them moulds.
So they're the moulds.
And when they took them over the canal,
Uphill casting ones.
not the casting, but the 5 ton ingots,
Yes.
one of them fell over the bridge, you know.
Really?
Fell off the, and into the canal.
You reckon it's still in there?
Ah, but
Of course
it
it is.
I
You know
couldn't
what?
get that out.
But I'd love to get my magnet on it and feel it and just know it's there.
Went over the bridge, fell off, went right over the side, down into the canal, a 5 ton ingot.
I'll have
I
to
mean,
look for
must have
that.
been worth something.
And where I am now as well, Ronald Walters' brother used to work as a crane driver, and he tells me of a time when the roof got pulled down.
My brother worked on the electric arc furnaces as a casting crane driver, and there was 2 casting cranes, and one day they had 2 heats, 2 melts in the furnace. Both furnaces, the G and the H, tapped out at the same time, and they decided to start teaming from the middle of the ladles and work out to both ends of the gantry, like.
Okay.
And with a full load of steel on, 65 tons.
Ladle, big ladle full.
The ladle, the crane and everything, it was too much weight because both cranes come together with the same sort of weight on it. And it popped all the rivets out the roof trusses, and the actual cranes come off the track, and it brought the roof down.
And what happened to the ladle full of oil?
It just went on the floor. That was it. It was,
Nasty.
and it was closed. The actual arc side was closed for about 6 or 8 weeks
Because the roof had
until
come in.
they got the roof back up.
Yeah, so while I'm up here on the new level, I want to talk about the chimney that was here for the blast furnaces. So in 1957 it was blown. Fred Dibb never got a chance to come and do his proper work on it. It was dynamite, man, but yeah, George Hutton remembers it. So you can see the amazing huge chimney. Apparently you could ride a horse and cart around on the top. It was so big, and that was part of the old blast furnaces from the late 19th century. But in 1957, with the new arc site being put in, they decided it had to go, so it was brought down, and George remembers it coming down. What do you reckon,
Anyway,
mate?
I'd been in the fitting shop sometime, and I heard them say there was a brick stack up there, and it was frightening to look at. It was enormous.
What's a brick stack, sorry, George?
It must have been down where the blast furnaces were, but them
A brick stack as in a big chimney?
120 foot.
Beast.
And they said, the old chap said, it's big enough on the top to ride a horse and cart round.
Wow,
And
really?
anyway, I went and watched it
Okay.
blowed up. A big siren went off. Wicked
Okay.
it was. And then a few seconds after, the explosion went, and that stack, as it got to about that
mate.
angle, it snapped right in off. And when it hit the floor, we was under George's way. You felt the tremor under your feet.
I'd love to have witnessed that, folks.
And I thought, well, I've never said that before, and I'll never say it again.
No, that is a proper snapshot of history gone.
Yeah.
Where I'm standing now was once in front of the stripping bay. So just there was a stripping bay. I'm going to explain quickly now how the steel process worked, really. Right up until the continuous caster, this is how it worked. So the scrapmen of the area, the noble scrapmen, the tatters, in families such as Gylippus, famous men would take the scrap, bring it down to be weighed in. And these bays, in the beginning it was the 5 massive open hearths, and there would have been what they called a scrap bunker. Now this bunker, as you can see from this aerial footage, was full to the brim with all different kinds of things. But it would be broke up and made ready for the open hearth furnaces. When it was ready, a magnet would pick it up, put it into a wagon, and the internal railway would move this scrap into number 1 melting shop. It would be lifted by the crane. The crane that lifted it in was called the charging crane. Now, I've never seen this, obviously, it was before my time, but I've been told it buzzed around like a bee. It was very nimble and very quick, and the man that controlled it was very smart indeed. You had to have your eyes in the back of your head. This crane whipped around back and forth like a ballerina, picking up these like square pots, you can see them here, rectangle boxes. The open hearth would open, it would go into the jaws, like the jaws of a dragon, tip in the metal and pull back out. Now the open hearth was just basically a massive puddling furnace. It blew hot air above the top of the metals. So like a refractory puddling furnace, but on a massive scale. This hot air circulated around the top and it would turn all this metal into 100 tons of steel, quality steel. They would test it at various points. Once it was ready, it would be tapped into these huge ladles. It would be 120 ton altogether, 20 ton of slag each, and you can see it being tapped here. And this is actually round oak footage. It would overflow into the slag pot, which was domed, not lined with fire brick. And then that slag would be taken over to the pools, as you can see here, and dumped. You know, it's just so amazing to see that stuff being dumped, really. All over the fence pools. This footage was on the fence pools. And also, the slag itself was used in the early days for walls and stuff. You see it all through the Pensnet and Brierley Hill, all through the Black Country. When it was right, lifted over, and then the pit side men would team into these ingot moulds. And you can see pictures of it here, and you can see the process happening. But yeah, so once these ingots were full, they'd be allowed to cool, and then they'd move from number 1 melting shop. Like I say, number 1 melting shop was here, a huge, huge building. It would be moved then to the stripping bay, which was just here where North Point is. From the stripping bay, it would either go 2 places, to an area where it would stay as an ingot, you can see it here being stored in an ingot store, or they'd go straight to what they call the soaking pits. Now the soaking pits were huge, huge things again, deep in the ground. The floor opened up, you put the ingot in, you know, this 5-10 ton massive ingot. You waited till it was a uniform temperature. Now once it was a uniform temperature, the ingot would be lifted out and put onto a special trolley which would take it to the heavy mill. Now the heavy mill would reduce these ingots into blooms. These blooms would basically, you had to roll it out like pastry, you had to get it smaller. So the heavy mills were taking it, or the cogging mill, the roughing mill, were taking it from a big ingot into a bloom that can be worked in the smaller mills. And from there they'd reduce it in size until they had the desired size. So once the ingots were up to the right temperature in the soaking pits or the reheating pits, they would send it to the cogging mill, which would reduce it from an ingot size into a bloom size. Now that bloom then would go off to various parts of the works to be reduced further. One of the places it would have gone is the old level. So the old level was bought, as I said, in 1909. And at this old level mill, they would reduce it further into bar stock. And the men that worked there, there'd be another oven there, a reheating oven. And you can see it there, look, the glow in the distance in that corner. That it'd come out there as a bloom, and by the time it had reached the end of the process, it would be a bar, you know. And that was the process of passing it back and forward through these rolls. Dangerous thing to do. Before we go up to the old level, I want to listen to George tell me about how dangerous it really was crossing the path of the steel, and how they'd have to have bridges across.
There was a bridge over the other side, so as the bars get longer and ever longer, and they're snaking out, Dangerous. Red hot. And me and Billy Wright, we did bother with the bridge one day. We was walking through the mill, and one of them lengths come out, and we had a run for it. Really? Oh, and there was a steel wall, about this high. We had to jump it.
And that wall was there to stop.
I thought, what stupid folks we are. There was a bridge over, Yeah,
it's a dangerous place. So, and we'll talk about accidents later. But let's now go up to where the old level, or the level street mill was, and talk about the chimney that comes. Yeah, so where I am now was once the old level mill, and just here was there was a massive chimney. You can see the chimney here. and this stack obviously were at the old blast furnace and the old mills. And in 1978 it was deemed to be unsafe, it was going to come down, so they decided to drop it and Blaster Bates come in. And I've heard a story that Les Pinches helped him out. So Blaster Bates, you can see him here setting up the dynamite and whatever. They brought it down and it crossed this cut here. And I bet there's still bricks in that woods over there. I bet there's still parts of it. Now, one story Barry Cooper was telling me is that they got around and gold sovereigns were in the top of this huge chimney stack. And they actually all went looking for him on dinner time, you know, the young lads. Another story is that Les was helping out and he managed to get hold of a golf ball sized piece of dynamite, and while he was working at the furnace, like, you know, he was throwing bits at the furnace door. First a pea sized bit, bang, then another big bang. Eventually he took such a large piece that it blew the doors off the bloody furnace, you know. Les got in a lot of trouble. There's one story now he tells me, you can hear it, about a shell he found in the scrap bunkers. You find all sorts in the scrap bunkers apparently, and if you ever found ordnance or bombs, you'd have to tell the manager.
If anybody in the bunkers found a shell or anything like that and report it, stop it going in.
Yes, oh God, yeah, it'd be deadly.
They'd get, and it was a lot of money at the time, they'd get extra £5 in the wages. We had a breakdown and I went down the bunkers and I found this big shell. I've carried it and I brought it back to our mill. Mickey Simpson, the union man, he done the same job as your dad on the book. I said, Mick, look what I found. He run off. I throwed it in the back of the furnace and run off. It blew the roof off the furnace.
Got the sack for that.
I got the sack.
But yeah, he got sacked over 100 times apparently. But it was one of them places where it was such a hard place to work. It was well paid, but it was very much a hard place to work, and you had to be a grafter. Right, so like I said, I'm going to go up now and look at the line. So I'm going up now to what was known as the Bagridge line. Now I've got some pictures on this line. So you got this one where it was taken where I am now, just before the bridge on the Dudley Road to the Dudley Road to Dudley, or the Cayford Road, Pensnet Road, the bridge. You got this lovely image facing the bridge, and we're going to pass under that bridge in a second. And just on my left, there was an engine actually. If you see on this map here, you see that area there. Before the steam engines, back in Agnoria days, early days of static and moving steam engines, but there was a steam engine running the line for many years. And also I've got some lovely images of it passing up this way. So there's this image here, and I've colourised this one. You can see how beautiful it was, you know, and this line with the internal railway. So my granddad, Joe, you can see him here getting his long service. He worked on the internal railway. There was hundreds of miles of track, as you can see here on this aerial picture. What I'll do is I'll redline the track, and you can see how much track there was. But imagine the skill in moving around tons of steel within a pot. And lots of people died as well. You'd have to watch everything because people were cutting in and out between the trucks all the time. And if you were a driver, internal railwayman, you'd have been used to death because people were getting crushed and such all the time.
I went to school with Arthur. We were best mates. He used to come to my mother's. I used to go to his mother's because he lived right by Pensnet School. And he come to work at Round Oak, and they gave him a job as a shunter, which they should never have done. He was too fat.
Not nimble enough. Not nimble enough.
No.
You need to be quick, don't you, in shunting? Grabbing and letting it loose.
Yeah. And he always wore a flat cap like yours. And it was on 2 till 10. And he was going on the railway track. And he said, all right, Les, I said, all right, Arthur. And I watched him go down the canteen because you could see right down the railway track from my job.
Yes.
Because my job was
looking towards Dudley. I know what you mean.
And
where it crosses the railway, isn't it?
He went out of sight anyway, and the bell rung for me to push another one out the furnace. So I went back to doing my job. And about 20 minutes later, I forgot who it was who shouted up to me, "Chap been killed on the railway line." I got Gus the furnace man to take me off. Do my job while I went down there.
Do you have a feeling it was No idea.
No. And the first thing I said was half of his head with his cap still on.
And that's when you knew.
Yeah. I knew straight away. I was sick.
Oh God, yeah, knock you sick.
Oh.
But there was also a coal store. So there was a coal store up by the Walters sheds. You can see it here from the air in the 1951. And that there was a coal store, and the fencing that protected that, because he had to have a security guard because coal was being stolen all the time. Let's go up to the engine sheds now, and I'll show you them actually. They're quite interesting. These were the engine sheds. In 1963, they changed from steam to diesel. This was sad. Some people even left, they even left the company because they just couldn't say goodbye to the steam. They even got rid of the steam crane. But yeah, Round Oak hung on to steam, but it got rid of steam at the same time that Beeching was doing his famous cuts. But these are the sheds. Yeah, it's such a shame when the trains went, Beeching did to the train line what McGregor and Thatcher would go on to do to the steel. Destroy it, Very sad. And we lost out. We lost Brockman Station and Brierley Hill Station, two beautiful stations. All these beautiful engines were cut up. George tells me that he remembers it well, 1963, the engines being cut up. And he tells me that it made him sad. You can see him with a cutting torch, he's cutting them up, putting them into the furnaces that they once served, Very sad. And some men actually left after the steam went because they didn't want to work with these new diesel engines, Quite ugly, the diesels. And you can understand why. They had to learn a whole new thing. The steam engines each steam engine had an atmosphere, it had a personality, you could say. And the men who worked on them couldn't bear the idea of just turning a knob and it went, They wanted to warm it up on a morning, clean the brasses, keep it clean, you know what I'm saying? It was like the job was not just a job, it was an art form, and they loved these machines, and some of these engines survived from like 1920s right through to 1963. I think they did keep a few for a while, but eventually they all went, so it's sad. I don't know if any survive, I don't know, I'd love to find out if they do. If these windows could talk, look at those. Again, individual panes, because they're easier to replace, but there's like some sort of, but yeah, that is just beautiful to see these original windows. My granddad would have felt the sun through these windows. And the chimney, it's a chimney stack in it. That is awesome, look at that. Look how it's splitting. But this would have kept my granddad warm in the winter. But yeah, so in 1963 they got rid of the trains, the steam trains. Very sad. Now George, who I spoke to, George Hutton, he remembers that. He was at work at the time, he was a kid, sorry. And he tells me how it upset him, It upset round here. They'd have been cut up in this area, the same area as they lived. And then the diesels came in, the big ugly diesels, like zebras, black and white stripes, or black and yellow, but they were very ugly. And they didn't have the charm of steam, did they? The steam was used for everything, for internal and external rail. So, the little engines that were puffing around the works, taking igneous moulds from one bay to another, from casting to the soaking pits, from soaking pits to the mills, they would use steam. Trains that would have been not always kept here, but they definitely would have been serviced here. See the tracks in the floor still. But yeah, it's gone. Such a shame. There's another chimney there where they keep warm in the winter. But yeah, from the air, this place, you can still see these sheds. It's the only part of Round Oak left, I think. And this is Round Oak. Apart from that new modern building up on the main road, which was the offices in the end, this is original, I'd say 1880s, 1870s. But very, 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 very sad that it went. Right, let's go back over to the works. So where I am now was once the famous level crossing. So anybody that grew up in the area would have known this. Famous pub, the three furnaces, was just there. There's a lovely aerial photo taken in 1947 where you can see the pub and the lions. And I love those sorts of early pictures. There's also a photo of the three furnaces. And I've got a lovely picture also, guys, of one of the slag pots crossing here. So the slag pot would have gone across the line here, coming possibly out of the open hearth, and later number one electric arc, which was just there. and it would have come along here, as you can see in the photo, and the slag would have been dumped there. Now, Ronald Walters tells me that people would often think the slag being dumped was them tapping the furnaces. It was a local myth, but actually it was slag being dumped. Itself equally impressive, and it would light up the sky. But yeah, so this was the famous line, the famous crossing itself, and it went when the works went. Like I said, there were miles and miles of internal track at Round Oak where my granddad would have worked. Such a skill to move ladles about and such. I mean, one of the ladle drivers, his name was Ernest John Harvey de Pass. What's special about, they called him Harvey, what's special about Harvey? He was a ladle crane driver, and he'd been working with a man called Mr. Hickman, and Mr. Hickman was the teamer. So as a ladle driver, it was Harvey's job to position the ladle on top of the ingots, and then Mr. Hickman would team it into the ingots. But the man in control of the ladle, Harvey, he was one of the first Windrush generation. So Harvey came over in 1948 on the Empress Windrush boat and into heavy industry, you know. He came to do a really hard job, and he worked very hard, and it was a skilled job at that. 1920, he was born in Jamaica. He came across 1948 on Windrush, and he became a ladle crane driver. He went on to become the first community relations officer in Reading. But I think he would have got some of the ideas that he formed from Round Oak, because Round Oak was a very tight-knit group. And everyone I've spoke to said there was no racism. You know, yes, they had a joke and a laugh, and they called people names that they shouldn't have done, wouldn't have been allowed today, but they called it each other, you know, and it was done in the lightest manner, and they all knew their lives depended on each other. You know, if Harvey, for instance, had have gone the wrong way with one of them cranes, or, you know, chipped some of that molten steel, people would die. And bonds formed in Round Oak that you can't get anywhere else, and that everybody mucked in, everybody was equal. You all, no straight backs in there, you know what I'm saying? No straight backs in there. Everybody earned their crust. Right, on we go. Right, so I'm standing there by the famous skull. So this would have come out of the huge ladles that was worked on the open hearth, or possibly the electric arc. Now, many people tell me that there's somebody in there. Now, I've heard another story recently that there was two incidents, because I believe that that there's where the metal would pour into the ingots, and because this is so full, I believe this is where one of the stoppers actually came off, and they couldn't empty it into the ingot, so it just went off, and they emptied it out into the floor and became a monument, probably found when they were flattening out Mary Hill. But yeah, there are possibilities that the one over on the fence pools, there's another piece of steel there with a wheeling. That could be, because apparently some kid got caught up to his legs in the steel, and his father had to push him in with a shovel. I can't find evidence of that, but because we're here now, I'll go through some of what I do know, deaths and accidents. Well, more so deaths, you know, some of the people that died, very sad really. So yeah, right back 1868, we had a chap called Tom Wellings. Now, he was crushed by a train that went past between him and a wall, and there was no room, and he was crushed to death. Very sad. Then in 1871 we have George Oak, and he was sadly decapitated by a train. He was knocked, his neck fell onto the line, and his head came off. Very, very, you know, awful things happened our ancestors went through to make the best steel in the world. 1882, some slag that was no doubt near to this person exploded. It happened regularly. There were bubbles or air bubbles, and often if it come into contact with water, it would explode, and it did so on this case, and it badly burnt him, and he died later. And there's a few cases like that. George Round was 22, and he was crushed up by the Waller's sheds. Basically, he was hooking and unhooking wagons, and it's called coupling, and that was his job. And sadly, he was supposed to use a pole. Because it was cold, he didn't use the pole, he used his hands, and slowly a train backed up, an engine backed up and crushed him, basically. It happened slowly. He came out crawling, saying, "I'm done for," and he died slightly after. Again, very, very sad. 1901, we have Thomas Partridge. He's 42 years old. He was scalded to death when a pipe burst, and steaming hot steam went all over his face and neck. 1903, there were 3 boys, and they were crushed by steel bars. So they were standing by some bar stock, and something broke. The bar stock rolled off onto them and crushed them to death, basically. Broke the legs, and then they would have died from secondary infection, more than likely. We have John Hines. Now, here's a guy that had his leg broke It was broken, and in doing so, he had to have it amputated. He died after the operation. 9 hours he lingered for, probably loss of blood. Very sad. 1911, we have Chase Brooks. Again, boiler exploded. The pipe burst, scalded him, badly burnt, died later. 1921, we have David Rutter. David Rutter was with a horse at the works. The steam whistle was blown, the horse bolted, he was pulled underneath the carriage, and the wheel of the cart went over his chest, crushed him, and he died. The accident George remembers is when he was working one day, he heard that the bulldozer, they were clearing the canal of, when they dredge it, and he heard that one of the lads in the bulldozers had fell in the canal whilst dredging it.
Somebody come in and they said the bulldozer's just gone in the canal with a driver on it.
Oh my life.
Yeah.
So it fell in the canal?
Well, they've been dredging the canal and they put it all on the sideline, and
Yes.
he was cleaning it away with his bulldozer, and in he went.
He never come back up
No.
again?
Well, I rushed down there, and there was 3 naked blokes that get totally naked.
Trying to get in there.
They was getting in that
course.
canal and disappearing out of sight.
When there's a life at stake, there's no such thing as humility.
They
is
must
there?
have been odd men.
Oh, of course they were.
And in no time,
Looking to save a life.
there was a queue. It was forming up. They're coming off the road by the 3 feet.
And now, by now, it's a body
Men, women, kids.
all looking.
And they come up. He says he's down there. He says only trapped his foot. He'd have come up else.
Not everything was sad. It was a dark humour they had at Round Oak.
He put a rope, piece of string or whatever it was, round his willy. And he tied it to 2 big flanges, and it was a pulling them through the shop. And when he come past me, I put my foot on like that, then made his thing bleed. But him, unbelievably he was.
And here's one from Les, Les tells us about this dummy he hung up, him and his mate. The one about the dummy, is that true?
Yes,
Is it?
yes.
My mum said he strung a dummy up on one of the highlights.
Yeah, but that was me and Fanta.
Oh.
Fanta's proper name was Graham Beadsmore. I helped him build the dummy,
Oh,
but he got up and hung it up. But everybody thought somebody had done it.
of course. So this was all a practical joke in
Yeah.
his mind and your mind.
Yeah.
Wow. I love them practical jokes. I'll carry on. I'll just talk a bit about this area here. So there's a photo looking up the track. There's a train coming as well, so that's dead interesting. So there's a photo looking up the track, and you can clearly see the building that which would have been here. And the train's coming now. So this is steel stock. But look at that, that's a beauty. A beautiful, and look how long this is. So yeah, this line was once crossed by the Round Oak line, and the Earl even said that he had the right of way, he was that proud of his early 18s, because it preceded this line, the old Oxford, Worcester and Wolverhampton line, the Pensnet's line. You can see it here in the snow, and you can see it again with the train crossing it. Some amazing photos of this area, but there you go. So that's all steel going off somewhere, probably come from China, but now it go off to different processes. It might be British, I don't know, but I doubt it very much. So yeah, there you go, a limb train on the old line that was once crossed by the Earl's mineral railway and his internal railway. And like I said, the offices are up here. These were the new offices, and you can see it's quite a new block. And George remembers the limousine being kept underneath here, and he had to make some special ramps to go underneath, so the limo would have been kept under there. And another thing that you would have heard clearly from where I am now is the bull, with the bull, the steam whistle. And here's Ron telling us about what he remembers of the bull as a child.
No matter where you were in King Shrimford, Wallheath, or the other side, you could hear Round Oak's bull blow to summon the workers to start work or finish work. It was a good timekeeper actually.
Yeah.
If you was out over Bagridge Way walking on the railway lines when we was children, and you could hear the bull blow at 2 o'clock. You know what time.
For those who don't know, the bull was a steam whistle, is that right?
Yeah, a big steam whistle.
And it
yeah.
called people to and from work. During the 1800s, in the very early beginnings of Round Oak, I've seen instances of court cases saying that they heard the bull at 11:15 and then at 12. So I think it was called in the past at more times than it is when it was ended. So that would have dropped off because of noise pollution, I imagine. So the bull run, yeah, massive.
Yeah, it was a way of starting and ending the shifts, and it's also the day workers' dinner time. To tell them when to break for lunch and when.
Yes.
It was just a thing that you did. It was automatic. You heard the bull. You went and clocked out.
Another thing about the old buildings, especially the old offices and some of the old works, they had old basement areas, and down in Dispatch as well. Some people have been telling me that the rats were absolutely huge. So you get down into these like underground cellar areas that part of them are from the old works, and the rats were massive, and that for that reason they always had a cat. So there's a cat here. There was one in the 70s. It was called Asshole, apparently. Asshole, the cat. Asshole, what a name. And you can see another one of the cats here in 1958 in Colin Knox's centenary book. You can see another cat being stroked, so it was well fed with mice and rats, I imagine, because with these old 19th century buildings, they've got old plumbing, old ways for the rats to live and breed, so generations of rat would have lived there and grown fat off the leftovers from the men from the 1850s right through to the 1950s, I mean, there were quite a few visits, being such a state-of-the-art ironworks through its whole history, really. There were always visits. I mean, some of the interesting people to visit was Prince Charles was one, and that was when Les was there, and Les tells us about that.
Prince Charles.
Oh.
I ain't sure now, I think it was in the early 70s, or maybe 68, 69. Prince Charles was come round the works. And the gaffer said to me, you can have tomorrow off and we'll pay you, because Prince Charles is coming round. And I says, I ain't going to have the day off. And he said, you don't say anything out of order and woe betides. Anyway, the next day, we was on 6 till 2, and he come round with all different managers. I was on the bridge, rolling the bars, and he come on the catwalk, Prince Charles. Well, before that, I was sent down the stores to get some gloves.
Ah.
And we was told down the stores they hadn't got any.
Yes.
So we come back, different blokes couldn't have any gloves because they said they'd got none. And Prince Charles appears on the catwalk with all the
dignitaries.
And he leant on the rail, looking down, watching the bars roll. And I pressed the tan oil button. And I said, hey, Stan, big Stan, my mate. He was nearly 30 stone at the time, big Stan Shanks. Hey, Stan, they've told us they got no gloves. That has got some.
So Les told Prince Charles where to get off. But you also had people like in the 50s, like Montgomery, the famous man that beat off Rommel in the desert. Montgomery, he visited. Various royal family members would have visited throughout its history. You can see an image here of, right lads, you can see an image here of the King and Queen at the time visiting, and they're standing up by the old offices. Such a shame. They should have kept those old offices, I think. They should have kept something. We're on Mill Street now. Mill Street, coming into Brierley Hill. Now, a lot of people have told me how Round Oak going affected Brierley Hill. Obviously, you had all these sandwich shops apparently as well that used to service the work, and pubs. So many pubs, A lot of the people that get in touch with me tell me about the pubs that were up here. A lot of them have gone there. There was so many, there's huge amounts of pubs. Right, what's your name, sorry? Steve, Jamie. Pleased to meet you. I do Black Country History Hunter. So, do you remember anybody working at Round Oak in your family?
Yeah.
A few. And what do you remember what it was like when it shut? What did it do to the area?
Ruined the area.
Ruined it.
Yeah. You had Martian Baxter there.
Oh, now what? Just here, gone.
Friday, the town was.
Loads of sandwich shops went there and stuff, you know. Do you remember the sandwich shop at the bottom of Pearson Street? I can't remember that.
Nah.
No, somebody tells me that they'd go there for the sandwiches. And who was it? Your dad that worked there?
Nah, my uncle.
Your uncle. What was his name?
Jimmy Green.
Jimmy Green. Well, there you go. Just passing Dog and Partridge. Just one of the many pubs that was used by the Round Oak men. I imagine different departments had different pubs, but I've been told that it was on a break time. You'd have drinks lined up on the bars, ready. You alright, Mucka? You watching it, are you?
I'm sick on video.
Well, you're on it now. Do you remember Round Oak? You couldn't, could you?
I never.
I was just telling everybody, you know, apparently on a dinner time, the barmen knew what everybody had. See, when they walked in, they was all lined up.
In the pub.
Oh, the beers were lined up, man.
Round glasses.
That's it, They knew exactly what they wanted. Nice to meet you, my man. Yeah, so they'd line these beers up. There you go, salt of the earth there. Good. They reckon we're the warmest people in the country. The black country folk, and with them right. Right, let's get down now to where when the open hearth had finished, they put in the new 125 ton. It had a 175 ton crane to hold the ladle. It was 125 ton electric arc furnace. So as I'm going down, I'll tell you where it come from. So in 1970, they decided to embark on Operation Nimrod. Nimrod was a program where they said they were going to start modernising the plant again, you know, for the umpteenth time. This modernisation would take the form of a bar straightening machine in dispatch. The first part, I think that was completed by 1972. By 1975, they had, 1973, they had the 850mm, which Les Pinches worked on with my dad apparently at one point. So yeah, the 850mm was a new mill that went in again mid-70s as part of Nimrod. Les Pinches worked there. And you can see some images of it going in here, actually being built. It was a love project. It took over the heavy mill, so the heavy mill was taken out and they put this new 850mm in, so it was capable of rolling, 13-inch across rounds, huge bars that would go off all around the world. And these bars, you can see some here being cooled off after being rolled and cut. Were sought after all around the world. You know, we made the quality steel here, and that 850mm was cutting edge. The rolls could be changed to change whatever job you were on, and there was a big stock room where they kept all the rolls. And there was also roller engineers, and you can see one here from Colin Knox's centenary book. The gentleman there measuring up the rolls. And also, I spoke to a guy whose father was a roll engineer. So there was engineers for everything: setters, fitters, pipe fitters, you name it. You know, the amount of skill at Round Oak was phenomenal. But this 850mm went in and was being worked up until it closed, really. It was just very sad that all this amazing equipment had to go. Right, so here we are. This was once M&J Electric Arc Shop. So the open hearth shut, which was running along here, what we spoke about, and the electric arc went in as part of Nimrod. So this was the third or fourth stage of Nimrod. First stage being the bar straightening machine, second stage being the 850mm, which we spoke about. And this was one of the final stages, really. This and the continuous caster and the walking beam. So walking beam's just a way, like a toast rack. It's a way of heating the steel to get it rolled after it's been made into blooms. Now, I've not got any footage of the Round Oak ones working, but I've got some footage here to show you folks of another electric arc working. It sounds like a welder. Tell me what you think. I mean, listen to this. Imagine witnessing this.
Instead of laborious loading through the door, he dropped 80 tons in one go.
was another work somewhere in the country, working an electric arc furnace, but it gives you some idea. We had the best kit in the world here for casting blooms. See, the continuous caster was just there, and that would then go out onto rolling beds, and then the blooms would cool. You cut out the casting shed, you know, you cut out the men that were putting them into ingot moulds, you know, what we saw earlier, and then stripping and rolling on the heavy mills. You cut out the heavy mill, you're basically constantly producing blooms. Right guys, I've got to the part where I know I've got to do, but I don't really want to. So before we talk about Round Oak closing and what caused it and you know, and all of that business, let's talk about Merry Hill a little bit. So Merry Hill was named after Merry Hill Farm, which is over in that direction, not far away from where I am now. The side of B&M, basically, where, you know where B&M is? The side of there, that was Merry Hill Farm. There was also a Merry Hill coal mine. Now this area back then, agricultural in the sense that there were fields being farmed. There's a lovely photo here of Merry Hill where you see a plough being worked on the fields. And yes, there was industry, but back then industry didn't necessarily destroy everything. So you might get a slag mound like in this picture running right up to a Norman hedge. You know, this is ancient woodlands. Ancient Saltwells is an ancient woodland. This is ancient agriculture. So there would have been ridge and furrow, medieval ridge and furrow, butted right up to slag heaps. But when they put the Merry Hill Centre in, it's shocking what they did, you know. They basically took all the old coal mining out, they took it down to bedrock, and then landscaped all the dirt they'd collected up into all these banks and such. So Level Street, the old mill was there. A lot of people get confused with the old mill and they believe that it's not part of Round Oak, but it is. The old mill was bought in 1909 and became a mill for rolling. So many men I've spoke to that have worked at the old mill, and it butted out that way, but obviously it's been cut out, you know, when they did all this landscaping, they cut it out. Unbelievable, you know, it's all there to be seen. But yeah, this is a monstrosity. I don't know how you feel about it. When I was younger, this was all shiny and new, and I thought, wow, I couldn't understand why my dad weren't too keen on it. But now I realise that it's no compensation for what we lost, you know. I ain't bitter, and I don't think my dad was, but you know, it was very sad. Merry Hill Farm, gone, but not forgotten. Right folks, so here we are. We're reopening the monument once again because the council made a mess of it the first time. So many people have turned out. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. Today, 141 years ago, a man called Richard Smith died. Richard Smith literally made Round Oak what it was today. He built it. So he was the one who came up with the idea. He was the one who put it into operation in 1858. So this video is all about the second part, World War I, right through to the sad end. But today I'm really honoured to say we got George Hutton. Where is he? Is he hiding? George, come on up, mate. You got to cut the ribbon. Last time they had a councillor cut it. I don't know if she had relations there, she might have done. But we've got to have a work. There was workers there and they didn't allow them to cut the ribbon, so we're doing it properly this time. George was a master plater. A master plater. You want to say a few words, George? Face the camera.
I don't know. What about Round Oak?
Where did you work and what did you do?
Round Oak steelworks are, yeah. A lot of hard work, very dangerous at times. But if you want to talk about workers, talk about the women. In the workers.
That's the ones.
Them and the real workers, women.
Love it. George.
24-hour shift sales, not 8.
Master plater and a true gentleman. So there you go, sir. For all the Round Oak workers that have ever worked at Round Oak, I'm doing that in honour of them now, really. So yeah, there you go. Come on, George. Get it cut. Watch your finger. There you go. And it's now open. It's now open. So before we move on with the rest of the video, I want to quickly ask us all really, just have a minute silence now for all the men that never come back from work at Round Oak. It was a deadly job. And many died, and George has seen many accidents. Just a minute silence for them and for anybody that's ever worked there, really. Their hard work, putting into what is making this country great.
Come Hieland man, come Lowland man, come every man up and man, and I'll tell you I got on it between Dundee and Perth man. A gate upon an iron road, a rail they did it come on, and rugged by an iron horse and a big beast to draw man. Then first and foremost near the door there was a wee bit wicket. It was there the guard me pay my tithe. He to me a ticket. I went to walk through the house, sat down upon a cast man to take a look at us saw, and the great big iron beast man. There's hussies in the line street row, standing up on wheels, man, and them the cheels that fed the horse were black as a pair of deals, man, and not a thing they eat the bread, but only coals to eat, man. He was the queerest beast I saw, he had wheels for feet, man. The beast that roared enough, we gave you water, earth and stains, man. We run at seek a fear for raid, the thought we'd crack our veins, man. Till by and by we stop it at the place got something gory, but not a word to that he say, but only sit and glory.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. Right. Brilliant. Thanks, folks. Right, that's it. See you soon. Round Oak also had long service awards. So people that served 25 years and 50 years would get a gold watch. My granddad got his gold watch. My dad never got the chance to get a gold watch. A lot of you watching the videos have showed me your gold watches that were given to your relatives, and it's so nice to see they're still in the family. They'd also receive a beautiful certificate. So I found a few examples out, and here they are. And they're such lovely gilded certificates, and it's nice to know that family members are holding on to these and cherishing them, you know, because they are to be cherished. My dad never got the opportunity to do his long service. I think he did 15 years, but my granddad Joe Bedard got his long service watch and certificate, but I don't know where either is, which is a shame. Also, retirements were a big thing. The department would get together, and I love looking through the acorns at the various photographs of all these different retirements, you know, and they'd have various presents, they'd chip together sort of thing, and you can see them all smiling and joking. And they'd get either a fishing rod and reel or a clock, whatever their hobby might be, they get something towards that hobby. If not, maybe a Vesta case, a wallet, who knows. If they didn't have any hobbies, they'd just give them some money sort of thing, a wallet with money in. But yeah, the community got together within Round Oak for retirements, and it was always a big show, I imagine. And I just wish I could have gone to one of those retirement parties and spoke to all those interesting characters. So behind me now was once the great offices. So they were some of the original works. And it later went on to become the computer place. So one of the earliest buildings on site went on to become one of the more modern ones. There's some lovely images from above. And I've also got a lovely image of it, colour image of it, just before it was knocked down. They should have kept this building along with many others. Again, behind the office, on the other side of the railway, was the modern office. You can see the top of it there. Some lovely images of it here with the Round Oak symbol. George Hutton was telling me about the limousine that was owned by the works. Don't forget, the works had its own police force. It had its own fire brigade. It had its own doctors and nurses. This was a city on its own. It was all working as a city, you know. It had its in-house post office, had its own post, internal post, its own telephone exchange. It was quite a big business, lots of thousands of people working there. Right, so we're on the Dudley Road now. I've got some lovely images of the Dudley Road. I'm going to go down to where the new time offices were. So the old offices is what we've just been to, but the new time offices were up here, put in 1947 as part of that modernisation. And you can see them here from the air. So these are air pics of the time offices. George says there was a bit of a white elephant and that they weren't used by many people. Underneath there were showers, a beautiful showroom, and he said it was really posh underneath, you know, this huge round sink that everybody could use at the same time with a fountain of water coming out the top, you know. Another guy, Andrew Barton, who sent me a letter because he couldn't get down. He lives far away now. He was an engineer in the laboratory. The laboratory was just up here on the left, where TI did all those experiments in the 50s with continuous casting. But he said that when he had to do his so many months, the man who was managing him said, look, on the first week, you've got to clock in on the morning and clock in on the night at the right time, but put all your cards through. And then at the end of the week, you can come in when you want, sort of thing. So yeah, we're coming up to now where the main offices were on my left. So I'm on the Dudley Road, and I'm by where the scrap would have come in. So the wagons would have turned in just here, and they'd have gone out on Level Street Way. They'd have weighed in, dumped the stuff in an area. You can see it all here from the air. So they'd weigh in on this weighbridge, get paid their money, drop off their load. Some say they'd come with water in the skips, you know, when it was raining, and others say that they'd go around twice. But there's lots of myths about Round Oak. Once in '68, Tube Investments had been told that they'd got to sell and renationalise. So 90% of the steel industry was nationalised then, but Tube Investments managed to keep a controlling stake of 51%. This became a problem at the end with the pensions and stuff, because they wouldn't admit to owing the money. So just there, see that white wall? There was a gate there once, and like I said, '68 it was nationalised. In the late 70s, in 1980, January, February 1980, British Steel went on strike, and this was the start of the real troubles for the works. Now, at first, the union men brought out the lads in sympathy. They wanted 15% rise, which is a lot, and they came out in sympathy, did the lads, but unfortunately, they weren't going to get the rise because, like I said, they were mostly owned by Tube Investments. So as soon as the union leaders, Dago Bates and the other 13 unions realised that they weren't going to get this raise, they were like, well, there's no point of striking then. So they went back to work. Within a day, there was these flying pickets from up north, and you can see images here, taking where I am now. So where I'm standing now, George tells me he had to drive a bus. He had to collect it from Cape.
They was on strike, but we were on strike. I got to go and get a couch in King's Swinford, and they bloody throwing and banging on the couch before you could get into work.
So it was a steel strike.
I used to get off in the Wallace sometimes,
Wow.
and I'd walk down the line to get into work. Oh, that was wicked.
Some of the buses had to have cages on the windows, but these ones looks like early. This is in January 1980. You can see the buses here turning in, and the scrap wagons, they'd ask the work and say, turn back, because we've been picketing, never cross the picket line. But my dad and many others crossed the line because the union men told them that they weren't going to get the raise anyway, and there was writing on the wall. Yeah, so the road I'm on now, Dudley Road, was the road that the men would have been standing with the braziers from British Steel, from up north, northerners down here, you know, because they're trying to stop lads around here going back to work, even though Round Oak was not part of the deal, i.e. it was that awkwardness, that 51% Tube Investments since 1968 this, and 49% British Steel nationalised. So it was a bad, I think they probably knew, you know, the government knew that this split would come in handy later when it come to giving out payments or to destroying the works, because they couldn't argue. Yes, we are, number one. Yes. Here, Black Country, good lad. So just there, that there, I think there was a meeting in there in 1982, a few months before the doors closed. And obviously they spoke about whatever was going to happen, and nobody could believe it, you know. Everybody was in shock, I've been told, at the end. Striking would have just meant they lost money, you know. So I used to think that they didn't put up a fight, but they did. The union men like Dago Bates did what they could, but at the end of the day, threatening to strike is not a concern to a company that's already decided to move abroad, you know. The thing was, they had to do it without causing too much of a stink. So they basically said the plant was unprofitable. Some say as well that Europe, when we were in Europe, we were having to drop our steel production to match Europe's production, you know, because it weren't fair on Europe, and we was also having to drop our prices. Electricity prices were high. So the work's become unprofitable for many reasons, but the nation should have made sure the electric arcs was low cost energy, you know. We could have made this works work. And what really annoys me is when it did go and they, you know, the place shut, I've been told, or I've read, that a Chinese company actually offered to buy it, but Tube Investments didn't want another steelworks here. They didn't want a steelworks here at all. They wanted to move this steelworks abroad to get the same supply but for cheaper. And they were so paranoid that somebody might try and make steel there, and you know, a competition to them, that when they sold it to the Richardson's brothers, they actually said, look, you must cut it up in sections. So part 1, destroy a bit, part 2, destroy a bit, and we'll pay you in sections, and we'll come and look what's happening. They didn't want to just sign the contract over and then them just start making steel again, you know. So they were determined to destroy Round Oak. Obviously Maggie Thatcher's got something to do with it as well. 1979 she came into power with the Conservatives, and she was determined to become a champagne socialist. You know, she thought that the markets would find their price, but unfortunately that don't put into the equation the community, you know. So ripping out Round Oak destroyed the community, and she was thinking about numbers, not people. You know, the man that she got to do it was McGregor. He went on later to destroy the mines and the miners, you know. So some say Round Oak was practiced for the miners, but British Steel was severely depleted by McGregor, and the miners were almost but finished. I mean, they are finished now. And now we're in a position where, yes, they found their price, the markets found their price, but the people that own these things now are abroad. Our steel's owned in China, our electric is in France, our water's in Germany or France, you know. So all these people that should be putting money into the infrastructure of this area for the benefit of the people are just thinking about dividends. They don't care about people, they care about money and how much the shareholders are going to get on the next dividend check, you know. So infrastructure's being neglected, our water system's being neglected, our steel industry's being neglected, and God forbid we have to fight another war. And it looks like it's coming, you know. After being in the army myself, you know, we need security for steel, we need security for water and food. The first attack won't be bullets, the first attack will be cyber. And if they've got control of our steel industry, they can disrupt it. And that disruption is all it needs for them first few months of disruption for them to get the upper hand, you know. But let's get back to Round Oak. So yeah, it went, and it saddens me because it didn't have to go, you know. People could have carried on making steel here. I don't blame anybody but the government really for the closure of it. There's a few factors: the high price of electric, the competition from foreign or European countries who can make it cheaper. Our unions were strong, and you know, we had good wages, and that's one of the reasons why Tube Investments chose to go to India, because they could just get the same quality steel for less, you know what I mean? People say the equipment didn't go to India, but I've been told by, you know, various people that they saw it loaded up, the arc furnaces and the mills, loaded up onto wagons and gone, rather than being cut up and scrapped. Yes, a lot of it was cut up and scrapped, and there would have been burning tackle all over the place at the beginning, but a lot of the machinery went to India and China to carry on being used. Whether it was sold or stayed within British Steel, I don't know. But there's so much secrecy around it, in the sense that you Google search it and it'll tell you that, you know, AI will tell you that there's no equipment came out of Round Oak, there's no paperwork. And I mean, at the end they offered my dad and other men welding courses, you know, and electrician courses. My dad did the welding course, but there were so many welders being made redundant at Round Oak anyway, so there was already a market which was saturated with people who need jobs. So creating more welders ain't going to fix the problem. Right, oh man, it's a long one, guys, but you know, there's so much to cover. Let's get down now. I think I'll end it there. You know, I've enjoyed filming this one. It's been a roller coaster. Right, so we'll finish where we started. I really hope you enjoyed that one. It's been an emotional ride for me, up and down. You know, there's been high spots, right, Mucka? High spots and low spots. Meeting you guys out on the streets, talking about Round Oak, especially at the monument. Very touching. A few of the guys knew my dad. This video has been about me learning about my dad, but also about all your relatives, histories, life, what happened at Round Oak and why it happened. Big part of my life growing up in the 80s, and I'm sure it's a big part of yours. So yeah, I hope that helps some of the younger generation understand what Round Oak was. And in the end, whose fault it was. We can't blame the unions. The men did their best to keep it open. But the sad thing was, at the end, Maggie Thatcher's poison had done its work. The working class was divided. Very sad. So I'll end it there. I thank everybody that's been involved, all the people that came to the monument, all the people that speak to me and message me about the works. If I've missed your relative out, I'm sorry. There's so many thousands of pictures I could have put on and I wanted to put on, but I can't make the video 7 hours long, unfortunately. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks George Hutton, thanks Les Pinches, thanks Ronald Walters. If I've missed you, I'm sorry. Thank you everybody. Thanks Stephen Cope on the Round Oak Steelworks group. Thanks Mr. Barton for sending the letter. And thank everybody for supporting the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and like, guys. Round Oak Steelworks Part 2. See you on the next one. Love it, love it, love it.
There are 40 shires that light their fires and bless the iron strong. On the china bake the potters make as they sing the Stafford song. For this is the song of the Stafford chairman and 40 girl in mine. Our fire shall burn and our mill wheels turn and the knot shall be our sign. best of beer. Our fields feed feast for the Christmas feast, and you may share our cheer. For this is the song of the Staffordshire man, forward in kill in mine. Our fire shall burn and our mill wheels turn, and the knot shall be our sign. We marshal our ranks on the grey pit banks, and our lads on the football field.